Matt Rhule named the head coach at Nebraska, and Luke Fickell taking the head job at Wisconsin. Both of them have their work cut out for them in a changing landscape of the Big Ten. To help us navigate it, let's welcome in our friend and national recruiting analyst, Trieu. Relationships are the lifeblood of recruiting. So how does Rhule build those connections with recruits in Nebraska and the Midwest as a whole?
Well, I think he's going to have to get started right away. They're going to be able to get out on the road here in the month of December, so need to make a lot of phone calls, have to assemble a staff, I think, of personable recruiters who's going to be able to do that in a short period of time. I think you also have to understand that this class is just going to be the starting point, and you do what you can to salvage this class, to fill it out and get some good players late in the cycle, but you're really also focusing on next year. I don't think you can judge these new coaches off of this 2023 cycle. And so you're building inroads, you're going back to places where they have connections. And I think they have a lot of them on the staff. You know, Matt Rhule is an East Coast guy, but he's recruited down in Texas. He's recruited in Florida, bringing Evan Cooper with him, who is a South Florida guy. So you already have some connections on the staff to some really fertile recruiting grounds.
Yeah, Alan, I have to go back and check my transcripts, but I can't remember if I'm good at geography or not. Nebraska's smack dab in the middle of the country, so it allows them to be equidistant when they recruit, right? And I think nationally, it's going to be really important because Nebraska is a brand. I think it's a recognizable recruiting ground in terms of what they're able to attract in terms of talent and star power. How important will it be for Matt Rhule to be a national recruiter?
Yeah, so first, shout out to your fifth grade social studies teacher. You are right on about where Nebraska is. You know your geography. But I think in Nebraska, whenever they've been good, if you go back and look at their history in recruiting and some of the notable players that they've had, they've always started at home, had some good homegrown players, but they've gone out and recruited players from other parts of the country. You know, and Ndamukong Suh, everybody knows that name, is from Portland. Levante David is a South Florida guy. Amir Abdullah, Cam Taylor-Britt, those guys came from Alabama. So when you go back and look through Nebraska's history at who they've had and who has succeeded at Nebraska, you can find players recently from every corner of the country. I think you can do that at a place like Nebraska. You have the tradition to build on with that, and they just got to get them there. And I think that it's in past stats, when you look at some of the guys who visited when Mike Riley was the coach and Scott Frost was the coach, kids will come check it out. I think they have to do that, and I think they will based on their connections.
This feels like kind of a glass half empty stance to take, but Nebraska, to me, feels far from absolutely everything, not necessarily in the middle of everything, but depends on how you look at it. Well, meanwhile, let's talk about the other hire. Fickell came as a bit of a surprise, not because he's not qualified, but because he had been in the mix for so many jobs over the last few years and really never pulled the trigger until now. Also, you saw reports just a few weeks ago that indicated interim Jim Leonard would get the permanent job. So, Alan, how does Fickell lean into his Midwestern ties to salvage the 23 Wisconsin class that's currently outside the top 75?
Yeah, so I think this is in contrast to what we just said about Nebraska. Wisconsin, at their heart, has always been a Midwestern built kind of program. They've had a lot of homegrown players, especially on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I think he'll continue to do that. They've always been able to get into Ohio, which I think is music to the ears of Luke Fickell because he's an Ohio guy and obviously recruited that state very well when he was at Ohio State and then Cincinnati. They've recruited Michigan at Cincinnati. That's a state that Wisconsin's been able to get into. And then they've always been able to sort of dip in a little bit. Wisconsin will always dabble out west a little bit, in Texas a little bit, in Florida a little bit. I think they'll keep that same strategy where they're going to have most of the class be from the Midwest, but then go outside the region to fill out some of those other needs. But I think it's a natural fit based on where Luke Fickell has recruited throughout his career.
Alan, we have a saying here on the show, all is fair in love and recruiting. And I wonder, can Luke Fickell now go back to some of the players that had committed to him at Cincinnati, even though it might seem a bit Bush League?
I think he's going to have to. Wisconsin's class has lost several players recently. And so in order to fill out this class with good players, you're going to have to take some players who are committed to other schools. There just aren't enough uncommitted guys out there for Wisconsin to fill out this class. They have some key needs. He's obviously done the legwork to build the relationship with some of those players in Cincinnati's class. I think it's going to depend on which assistants come with him, but wouldn't surprise me to see him do that. You've seen other coaches in the conference do that when they take over. I remember when PJ Fleck got the job at Minnesota, took a lot of players from his class at Western Michigan, and a lot of those guys are doing really well now, like Tanner Morgan, John Michael Schmitz, players like that. So like you said, all is fair in love and recruiting. And I think that some of those Cincinnati kids will be targeted.
Whew, that hurts. Also seeing some Cincinnati kids enter the transfer portal too, so it's going to be tough there. All right, time will tell, but both Wisconsin and Nebraska landed seemingly home run hires with these guys, and with Fickell in particular, he's leaving a program that's about to be a Power 5 school. So how much do these two moves signal that the Power 5 is quickly becoming the Power 2, and Big Ten and SEC really possess the more desirable opportunities for coaches?
I think it shows that a lot, and I think it also shows that the Big Ten West is serious about competing with the teams in the East for conference championships and also for recruits. I think when you look at that side of the conference now, you have several coaches with NFL backgrounds, with really successful backgrounds. You have several coaches who are known as very strong recruiters. So when you look at who's going to go head to head on the trail, and you're going to have PJ Fleck, and you're going to have Luke Fickell. You're going to have a staff at Iowa that always finds a way to find NFL players and turn them into top players at Iowa. You have Matt Rhule there now. I mean, when you look on that side of the conference, it's going to be extremely competitive. I think year to year, any of those teams can finish first. Any of those teams can finish last. And with this new blood entering, I think the Big Ten West is going to continue to try to climb and compete with the Ohio States and the Michigans and the Penn States on that other side of the conference.
Yeah, I think from a recruiting standpoint, we're going to see the on-field battles really mimicked, right? There's going to be a lot of parity. And right now, there isn't much right now, right? You see in Michigan, you see Ohio State, you see some of the other programs that are really high up on the list. Wisconsin outside the top 75, Nebraska outside the top 30. Alan, how high are the ceilings for both of these programs with new head coaches? Could they make a push for top 10 status?
Probably not in this class. It would take a lot. There's just not enough time. And like you said, not enough uncommitted players out there. They're going to have to raid from other classes a little bit, I think, in order to do that. I think this one, like I said, you're just going to have to try to salvage the class. And I don't think top 10 probably should be the goal. But in future years, can Wisconsin and Nebraska be top 10 to 25 recruiting classes? They've had them in the past. I don't know about top 10, but both of those schools have been in the top 15. Both of those schools have been in the top 20 to 25. And so I think you can do that at both of those places. I think both of those coaches have shown that they can have really highly ranked recruiting classes. Matt Rhule had some really good classes at Baylor in his short stint there. Luke Fickell really turned Cincinnati recruiting around to the point where they were competing with Big Ten schools and beating them for recruits. They have a number of notable players in the NFL from those classes like Sauce Gardner. So I think both of them have the opportunity to push up the recruiting efforts for both of those schools. You just may not see it until the 2024 cycle.
Patience is what you're saying, Alan. I gotcha. Thank you so much for all your great insight. I appreciate you joining us here.